So thanks. That was great, Jen. I don't know how many were here last year when I did the analogy to the Tesla and how fast technology was changing. How many were here at the last? Most of them. So I have to tell you that it's 1 year later, technology's changed a lot, but my wife still says that Tesla is a better driver than me, and the fact that I crashed mine didn't help her view of that. So. Technology keeps moving. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how digital identity, how identity's progressing in this country and around the world. And the slide I have here talks about digital identity, but the thing that's broken isn't digital identity. I'd say it's really identity. How do we prove who we are, right? No one knows what this thing called digital identity is, but we all know there's a problem. When we show up at a call center and you are asked when you're at CRA or something like that, what is line 142 of your tax return and you happen to be at your office, or you're asked a whole bunch of questions, your mother's maiden name or all these other questions to prove who you are, that's not an experience that works well for people. When we show up at a branch or a telco office and I want to create a new account and I have to provide documents or fill in my forms and wait 30 minutes to get something done, that's not a fantastic experience. And certainly when I come online and I want to open a bank account or get a benefit from the government and I can't prove who I am, that really stinks. So we're all this me that's standing in the middle, where all we want to do is be that person to show up, call center, in person, online, and prove who we are. So we talk about this frictionless you are you, and how do you do that with efficiency, as Jan talked about, with privacy, and with security. So when you think about those problems that we talk about, like showing up at a call center, think about the statistics in cyber, right? So far in 2017, 3.4 billion records have been compromised. That compares to 4.2 billion records in all of last year, which is kind of staggering. There's 1,254 publicly announced breaches. That's not including the ones that aren't announced. There's 4,800 published cases. And you can see the industries where these breaches are happening, from healthcare to banking to across. So when you're showing up at that call center to get data, you think about technology and AI and who's using this data. Who's going to get the data from all these databases and piece it together and figure out you are you, and here's your address that came from a health provider, and here's your questions that came from here. The bad guys are using this data to be able to answer questions, to get credit cards, to do things. So knowledge-based questions, or the what I know, using that kind of stuff isn't as secure as it used to be, and it's too hard. So we go to the gold standard, right? Everyone knows the gold standard. The government of Canada kind of dictates that if you show up at a bank branch and you show this super secure document, then you must be you. So there's a question, like everyone in the room laughs, right? I've traveled a lot in the US lately, and I go to hotels, and every time I go to the hotel, they say, can I have your credit card, and can I have this? And I'm probably not the only one who notices that behind that clerk at the hotel is that camera, that totally insecure video recording system that if you're at Westin Hotels or someplace like that is recording millions of these every day. How does that work, right? If I have one of these, I must be Greg. But they can go into an insecure video system, get a card that I'm me, have all the data, and if I show up at any government in the States, I type in my driver's license number, I type in the data on the card, I pay $7 and they mail one. Canada's much better than that, because in Canada, you go to the government like in Quebec, and you type in your driver's license number, you type in your old address, you type in your new address, and it's free. They mail one. So that's not a great solution when we say this is identity, and how do I prove who I am? I started this business when one of my cousin and one friend both had mortgages put on their house, and it wasn't by them, because someone showed up at a lawyer and said, hey, I'm Joe, and I'd like a mortgage on my house. That doesn't, our point is that doesn't really work really well. And then, people always go for the Holy Grail, and what's the greatest thing? People are like, okay, biometrics solves this. If I have biometrics, where I have the device and I can take a picture of your face or put your finger on your iPhone, then no one can be me, because if I have biometrics, identity is solved. And our point is it's not solved, right? So the article here that talks about hackers spoofed the Samsung iris scanner, they said, we got this super secure iris scanner, it's fantastic. You hold your Samsung phone in front of you, and in a couple seconds, it knows that it's you, and it's great. But I got to give the Samsung folks credit, because it did take 8 days until the hackers broke the iris scanner by basically putting a contact lens over a photo of your eye that was taken at a distance, and now they can be you for healthcare records or anything else. Like, it's not, the problem is these things are breakable. The article on the right is the one that scares me more. It's the one where these researchers out of Japan show if you're on Facebook and you have pictures of you on Facebook like this, and any picture that's taken less than 3 meters away, they can lift your fingerprints off the photo and put it on an iPhone, and now they're you. So it's nice to say, oh, I've got an iPhone, I put my finger on it, it has to be me. It's not true. If someone wants to be you and see your health records and get in and they get your device, there is no silver bullet in all of these, right? So I talked about, those are the kinds of things I talked about. I talked about what I know information, like the questions they ask. I talk about what I have, my super secure driver's license, and what I am, biometrics. The problem is none of these work on their own. We're not saying everything's infallible, but you need these things to work together. Like we need, as an industry, to be able to solve identity, we need to have a what I know that's really strong. It's not just knowledge-based questions. It's things like my bank password, because my bank password is something I don't share. It's monitored. There's frequency of use. They know if I log in at 9 o'clock in the morning from Toronto and then 11 o'clock from the other side of the country, it can't be me. You need strong what I know factors, and I would say the bank password and login is probably the strongest among those. We need what I have factors, like my mobile device. You know, if I'm logging in and I have this mobile device and the SIM is in the device, and I know my password, it's like chip and pin. I'm not going to get defrauded. And if you go to the third level, the what I am, what if we can compare our face against the source data at a province or place and actually know this is Greg when he's registering for service, so we know it's not someone else who's being there. And these things have to get used together. So the what I know, as an example, even if I use my phone and a fingerprint most of the time, when I switch phones and go to a new phone, there's a break in the process. How do I prove who I am? How do I recover? You're going to need the what I know. You're going to need a bank login or something like that to make this identity ecosystem we talk about really secure. So I talk about a lot happened in the year, and this isn't to say SecureKey did anything great, but you saw in November last year the banks invested $27 million in SecureKey to say, let's go faster on digital identity. So I want to say what this isn't. What this isn't is SecureKey saying, hey, this is great, let's do a SecureKey thing. And this isn't the bank saying, let's build a bank-based identity network. It's the banks recognizing that, look, we can't solve this problem alone. This is way too hard a problem, and the bad guys are coming all over the place. So to know that Greg is Greg, or that Jan is Jan, or someone like that, I need to be able to have data from all kinds of providers. If Roger says, this is Greg's phone, 416, whatever the number is, 270-1919 if you want to call me. So if they say that's my phone, and I can log in at TD Bank or at Royal Bank, that actually starts to make it really secure. And if the province starts to join in and say, yeah, we'll do biometrics and check documents, know that it's you, all of a sudden we have an ecosystem where parties are working together to share data, where we can lower the cost of identity security for everybody, and it will work across all industries. This is not, the banks are not saying this is just for big banks. It's for small banks, it's for telcos, it's for government, it's for CRA, it's for all those places. How do we make the ecosystem more secure for everybody? And it can't get solved by one party. It can't get solved by banks, it can't get solved by telcos, and it can't get solved by governments working on their own, building some government ID that I don't remember my uppercase, lowercase, number, letter, password next time I come back. It just can't. So this is kind of the view that we've been working on. So if you think about the attributes or things you have, your bank knows your name, your address, your date of birth, things about you. Your telco knows, hey, this is Greg's phone. The SIM is in the device. If the SIM changes, the bank should be notified so we don't send a message to that phone to validate a transaction. Your government knows who you are, your face, and they can check your face against a document. And companies like Equifax or TransUnion know your credit history, your credit data. There's more providers than that. There's things like background checks and others. But the point is that consumer, that me in the middle, has relationships with all those parties, and there's data there if she wishes to share it at other parties to prove who she is, if we could do that in a really easy-to-use manner. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, right? We believe there's digital assets and there's destinations. I have all these assets at providers like Royal Bank or TD or BMO, and I want to go to other places because I want to open a bank account, or I want to open a telco account, or I just want to change my address. I want to prove I'm trusted because I'm a Kijiji user and I don't trust people coming into my house. I want to know they're known before they come into my house to buy things, or they want to know I'm known before I come into their house. Or for that matter, for all of us who've had babysitters or guitar teachers for our kids, have you ever done a background check on the guitar teacher or the person who spends all this time with your kids? You don't, because it's $65 and it takes 3 weeks. But what if it was a couple dollars? You could say, I want to know you're verified before you spend hours in a closed room with my daughter. It just isn't possible before. I think it's going to be possible in this future world that we're going to. So here's an example of the POC one we did with some of the banks here, just to show you kind of what we think usability is. This is 3 versions back, so bear with me. But generally for a user, this should be really easy. I should be able to choose who my bank is, my kind of provider. I should be able to log into my bank, as she does here. And this was done for usability, and she's a very fast typer, or they've sped up the video or something. I can't type that fast. You'll consent that I want to be able to see my data. I want to be able to share my data where I want to share it. And when she says OK, I know you saw the legal terms. Yeah, there's legals. Her account's created. And she may go further. She may say, now I want to validate my phone. It says, are you willing to share your name and phone number with the telco? She says, OK. And it comes back and it says, I think it comes back and says, you're validated. OK, you're with Rogers. We know who you are. And she goes on to get a credit score and answer questions and load her credit agency. We don't think in usability that users will load all this at once. They may just load a bank to start or a telco to start. But there's a way to get started in the ecosystem and add other attributes as we get going. And she goes on and she looks at her data, I think, as she goes through this. She's looking at the assets. I want to be clear that data here isn't on the phone. The TD Bank data has to stay at TD. The TransUnion data stays at TransUnion. The Rogers data stays at Rogers. And we just allow her to share it where she wants to, when she wants to. So that's kind of how easy we think it should be to enroll. And then when I want to use this, how would it work? So this is a very simple example of showing she goes to a telco and she wants to get a new phone. So she wants to get, I think, the iPhone 8. I don't know. It's not yet. Pre-announcing. So she basically has her mobile device. And she can, in this case, use a QR. She could enter her mobile number. She could click a link in an app if she wants to do that. But generally, what it asks her when she does that is, are you willing to share this data from TD? Are you willing to share your credit score? Are you willing to share your phone is validated? And when she says OK and puts her finger on the button, what you'll see on the screen at the telco is it says, welcome, Lena, your account's open. So that's a lot different from where we go today, where it takes 30 minutes in a telco to open a store, open an account to get things done. It's a lot different for the user. And you think about, like what Jan talked about before, this whole, it has to be usable. It has to go fast. It absolutely has to be that kind of usable to make this work. But we need the security and trust, right? That chip and pin kind of security that before she did that, we knew what device she was on. We know the SIM's in the device. We know the SIM hasn't changed. My screen's gone. But it's OK. It's probably just the next one. If I hit this, it goes. Yeah. OK. But it has to be that easy. So this is some of the end user flow that came out of that. So an example here. She'd like to go to Rogers, get a new phone, click the Start Here button. It says Authenticate at Royal Bank, enter your username and password, or put your finger on the button. It says, are you willing to share this data from Royal Bank and this data from Equifax to create an account? And then it says OK. That's quite dynamically different from where we were before. And you could think of that as a telco, but what if it was opening a bank account or getting a new credit card or signing up for benefits at the government? You can't do that today. And anyone who's used the concierge service, we have about 7 million credentials using it in Canada now. The first time you show up where they identity proof you and ask you what was line 142 on your tax return, we know that doesn't work well. So we're doing stuff to improve that because we can share identity in this kind of way. So the point about identity that we'd make is just that when I want to share identity today in this manual world with my driver's license, I can show up anywhere and the consumer is in charge. When I show up at a bank, I pull out my driver's license, I share my driver's license, I share this bill, they know where it is. And the pros of that model are the consumer's in the middle, and the party who's giving the claims, this is a really important point, the party who's giving the data, the driver's license data, doesn't know where I share it. A lot of people, when they go electronic, say everything's connected, and we know. If we make it, so I want to make that one again. When I show my driver's license to a bar, a liquor store, there's no way, and everyone here does it, there's no way the state knows where you're going. If we build this system so that there's tracking, and someone in the middle or somewhere else where they can track where you go, it won't work because we don't have privacy anymore. I don't want my bank to know. I don't want my telco to know I went to a cancer care clinic or I went somewhere else. I don't want them to know all that information. So the manual world, they can't know because I provide paper documents or I provide plastic cards. They can't know. The cons of that world are there's lots of friction, lots of fraud opportunities. I don't know how many of you had kids who had fake driver's licenses before they were actually of age, but they're pretty easy to get. I see some hands go up in the room, and they're there. And so it's just not a good approach, the manual way. So we came up with this credential broker approach, and we did the concierge broker in Canada. We have a broker in the middle where you can log in, and it's really good for login. But the NIST people in the US said, hey, this isn't a good approach. Because if I have a broker, it's good for login, but if I have a broker in the middle, and a lot of talk around brokers in the middle now, if there's a broker in the middle, that broker could be honest but curious. They want to know the data that's going through, so they're told, hey, watch everywhere that Jerry goes or someone else goes. I also have a single point of failure. If this is going to do healthcare, get me on airplanes, have me see records, it could fail and the whole system is down. And it requires us to build honeypots of data. So the providers of identity data, like in the UK, they have this honeypot that knows here's Greg's driver's license, here's his face, it's all sitting in one big database. It's not the firewall that's going to get breached, it's people, like we're seeing in Swift. They're going to go after the people, they're going to say, hey, I have your daughter. She's not coming home unless I get keys to the kingdom. Not a good idea to build honeypots. Better to keep the data where it's supposed to be and let users control it and release it where they want. So NIST says, we want a system with no broker in the middle, which is why you saw in the last year, Homeland Security gave us a grant to say, here's how you do identity in the US. So the system we came up with now that you'll see launching in Canada later this year is all based on blockchain. So I know lots of talk, Don Tapscott talked about blockchain. It's all distributed. And the general benefits of this are there's no data visible to the network operator ever. There's no way SecureKey can ever see the data. There's no central database or honeypots of data. There's no central point of failure. It's triple blind. Provider can't know where I share. Receiver doesn't need to know that I bank at TD Bank or at Royal Bank or wherever I bank. And the network in the middle doesn't see anything. So really beautiful the way this architecture's come together. Couldn't do it without working with all the banks in the country, without working with the telcos, without the provinces who we're working with to be able to load data on that side. But it's coming together. It's an ecosystem that's starting to say, hey, let's bring all this together and do it. And you're hearing a lot about blockchain. So I probably don't need to speak on blockchain because everyone's hearing it right through this conference. But the general point about blockchain, right, is it's the dark point in the middle. Blockchain allows multiple different parties to securely interact with each other using the same universal truth, right? So we looked around, we were building this thing, and we looked at all the different variants of blockchain, and we chose Hyperledger. And you saw recently we announced a partnership with IBM where they're going to help promote the kind of work we're doing globally, because this is the kind of security that's needed out there, and we needed a product that was open source, that was scalable, that could do 10,000, 20,000 transactions a second, and be able to solve the kind of identity problems that we're trying to solve. So you hear Marie Week speak later today on Hyperledger. It's a phenomenal product, and we couldn't build the solution we're building without that product. But what we had to implement on top of Hyperledger are all the kinds of things that we think are out here. So when you think about identity, yes, think about ease of use, but also think about privacy. Because the number one thing in identity that if we don't solve this, we haven't solved identity, is privacy. That no data is visible to the network operator, ever. There's no broker in the middle. If you put a broker in the middle, this won't work because someone will be able to track Greg went to healthcare, Greg went to this club, really? Greg went wherever Greg went. It's not a good idea to have a broker in the middle. There's no central database or honeypot of data. The provider of claims can't know where I'm going. If you go to the government and say, hey, we're going to put this system, here's a broker in the middle, and we'll share driver's license data, but there's a broker in the middle, the government shouldn't do it because now we have user tracking. So it won't work for healthcare, it won't work for voting, and it won't work for a lot of the cases that we have. So, but these are the kind of points I think you can see them. No central point of failure, no way to track an individual, and privacy first. We call this blinding, where you blind all the parties, triple blind privacy. That's kind of what we think is needed to go there. So if you think about all the places you'd use this frictionless identity, think about opening a bank account where it's a couple clicks to open a bank account. Or think about healthcare. Like in Canada today, if someone wants to get healthcare, it's great that it's free for those of you in the US. But when I want to get healthcare, I show up from St. Catharines and I go to UHN to get work done, and I go home after my procedure. Now I want to see my data. Oh, sorry, you can't. You have to drive back from St. Catharines to Toronto, show your plastic card. Maybe it has a picture on it. Maybe it's a red and white, as I still have, which is a great thing not to have to change it. But you show up your card, you prove because you have that card that it's you, and now they give you a password to log in. You've driven to Toronto, you paid the $25 for parking, now you drive back to St. Catharines, and now you have the benefit of having one login for the UHN system, another login for your test result data, and another login for your St. Catharines data. It's not a usable problem to solve. What if I could prove who I was and have one simple login to all of these different systems? And that's some of the use cases we're building now with UHN and some of the others. And then apartment rental, for those of us who move, think about the pain in the bum it is to move apartments. All I want to do when I go to an apartment, I want to prove who I am, prove my credit score is over 700, here's a background check to say that I'm not a criminal. That's all the landlord wants. And then after I sign the lease, what would be great for me is, hey, would I like to be able to share my data to open an internet account so I can have internet turned on, and do I want it next Tuesday? And would you like tenants insurance? Click here to get tenants insurance. These kind of ecosystems and opening up API, as Jan talks about, are the things we need. And like I put this slide up of the use cases that are coming to us now every day, and they're exactly the kinds of things Jan talks about on usability, how you get networks to go. Is there a need for this? Like, how many people in the room kind of would like this, would use this, would want this here? So I see a lot of hands go up. There's a need. Is it big enough? Like, we think this is kind of big enough that crosses all industries and it makes it cheaper. This is what the banks are on. We've got to make it more affordable and more secure for all industries. And is there a business case? There's a huge business case. It's tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to each of these organizations that are signing up to work on this. But you'll think of the cases that are out there. We think it's coming. It's still evolving. It's not done yet. We're at the beginning. But this is a solvable problem, and we're making leaps and bounds to get there here in Canada. And we're hoping to kind of show the world, here's a way to work together and solve it. Because in the end, it's putting the consumer in the middle. It's creating a frictionless experience. It's strong identity, where I've got multiple sources of validation. It's strong authentication, where I've got what I have, what I am, what I know from multiple parts. It's privacy first, and it won't work without an ecosystem. We need everybody to work together on one set of standards to make this go. It's one, blockchain is everyone's on the same system, not on different ones to make it go. So that's kind of our journey, and thanks for hearing me.